Yeah, so, hello, good morning, good evening, whatever. So it's been a good long while since I did one of these videos where I point a camcorder at a coffee table and I showcase whatever's on there. Good reason for that. Typically something like this would be done for pickups, but since I haven't done any pickups and pickups have pretty much stalled at this point, well, I haven't done a video like this, pretty much. But considering pickups have stalled, for reasons I really don't want to get into, but, you know, sometimes it happens, you know, where you do a regular run of pickups and then you kind of, you know, stop or stall or whatever for whatever reason. But while pickup videos are kind of stalled at this point, figure it'd be a good opportunity to update the collection videos, since the ones I have on the channel currently are about a year or two out of date. So might as well get around to doing that. And I'm going to try and bang one of these out at least once a week or once every other week, you know, God willing. And I'm going to start off with the easier stuff. I'm going to start with the portables, and then, you know, as time, you know, as we progress, we'll eventually do the bigger stuff. And you know, there's a lot of shit to cover, so it might take like a good dozen videos or so. But anyways, we're not going to dawdle. As you can probably tell from the title, we're going to cover PlayStation Portable or PSP. So you know, good place to start. This is a PlayStation Portable PSP. This, I believe, is the 2000 model, which is, I think, is the second major revision or something like that. They made like 3 different versions. 4 if you count the PSP Go, which is a smaller compact thing, only takes digital games, no UMD, which is the thing, you know, little discs that go in. Yeah, there we go. You slip a disc in there, or a UMD, as they call it. You notice a black thing here. That's because it has one of those batteries that have extended life. So it's a bigger battery, it's a fatter battery. That's why you have a plastic thing here. Typically, this is a Star Wars themed PSP, so it would come with, this is the original panel, has a nice little decal of Darth Vader, and happy to say that the decal's kind of high quality, because there's not a scratch or a bit of chipping to be found anywhere, so, you know, kudos to that. And this is the battery it originally came with. It didn't last that long, typically. So, anyway, the one thing to note with my PSP UMD collections is that I don't have the shells anymore. The original clam boxes thing that they usually come in. I typically keep them in these kind of containers, and they carry like 4 UMDs a piece. I used to keep the boxes elsewhere, like I store them in a bigger box, and I, you know, kept it elsewhere, but I don't know where those were. Chances are they were lost in, you know, a cleanup at some point. I don't know, it's been a few years. I typically go with these because, well, you know, I'm space conscious. I don't have a lot of space, you know, to store these things, so if I could try and minimize the space that it takes up, you know, I'll go with that. So, yeah, sad face, you want to keep everything intact, but I still have the manual somewhere. So, anyways, I'm sort of rambling here. So, seeing as that's typically a Star Wars themed PSP, it naturally came with a Star Wars game, and I bought this like, you know, brand new or something, like whatever it was. So we got Star Wars Battlefront Renegade Squadron, which is a PSP exclusive entry in the Battlefront series. Fan of the Star Wars Battlefront games. I got both of them on the original Xbox. I even downloaded the second one on Steam, but I don't care for this. Probably due to the fact that you know, when you really get down to it, I don't like having to play with the nub, which I was never a big fan of. you know, and this is like the closest thing to an analog control setup, and I'm not a big fan of that. So, and this typically uses the nub, so the game's fine for what it is. I'm typically not a fan, and but I will tell you one game that I am somewhat of a fan of, and pretty much the main reason why I bought a PSP, is Castlevania the Dracula X Chronicles. Basically a remake of the PC Engine Dracula X Chino Rondo, Rondo of Blood, whatever you want to call it. And it actually includes the original Rondo as well as a remastered version of Symphony of the Night. So you're pretty much getting the entire Dracula X saga, with the exception of the Super Nintendo game, which I'm sure a lot of people would not care for, but would have made it complete. I mean, hell, if you're going to include that shitty, you know, alternate mini PK game or whatever it's called, you know, when you don't have a proper system card, or anyways, I like this. It's a nice little remake. It was the first chance I got to play Rondo, if nothing else, before it was eventually released to the Wii Virtual Console, the original Wii Virtual Console, a year or so later, whatever time frame it was. Anyways, moving right along. WWE SmackDown vs. Raw 2009. Typically no reason to get this other than it was cheap, I guess. And I wanted to see what it was like, I suppose, or something. And I guess most of you who've seen my collection stuff in the past or followed my shit knows I like to collect these wrestling games, but the ones on the PSP I really don't care for. You know, I just bought that one and I was fine with it, because most of these are the same as on the PS2 anyways, so anyways, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Anyways, next up on the we got Final Fantasy, which is an updated remake or a remaster of the PlayStation 1 version of Final Fantasy, which itself was a port of the WonderSwan version, itself an update to the original Nintendo Entertainment System version that came out in 1990 something or whatever. Anyways, I prefer this over the NES version. You know, it's got high-res graphics and additional dungeons and all that shit. And it also includes stuff from the Game Boy Advance versions. You got Final Fantasy II, which is a update, remake, whatever you want to call it, of Final Fantasy II on the Nintendo Famicom, which we didn't get until, I'm guessing, Final Fantasy Origins on PlayStation 1. Because the game we got as Final Fantasy II was actually Final Fantasy IV on the Super Nintendo. And speaking of which, we got Final Fantasy IV, the complete collection, which contains an HD remake, or whatever you want to call it, of Final Fantasy IV. Also includes the After Years, which was the follow-up mobile / Wii sequel that used a lot of DLC or whatever the case was. And there was a mini game in between called Interlude or something like that. It's a nice little thing, and I enjoy. You know, someone who enjoys Final Fantasy 4 or 2 or whatever you want to call it. You know, I was pleased with it. Mod Nation Racers. It's a game where you could create your own tracks, your own racers, whatever the case may be. Basically, the customization is what sold me on this. And I figured since I didn't have a PS3, couldn't get that version, might as well get this one, because it did sort of intrigue me. And I had my fun with it, you know. Yeah, Outrun 2006 Coast to Coast, which I also have on the Xbox. Good little racing game, little driving game. And next up we have Midnight Club LA Remix, which is another pretty decent game, I thought. We got Space Invaders Extreme, which was fairly cheap, I believe, when I bought it. So, no complaints there. We got Blaze Blue. And already the auto-focusing is kind of stingy. It'll be fun to check out the DS games, which I'm going to do right after I'm done with this video. We have Tekken 6, which I've probably sampled for about 5 minutes. It's alright. Never got around to actually giving it a full go. Might have to find the time. You know, no, it's not that I don't like it. It's just I didn't have the time, and had other stuff to do. Darkstalkers Chronicle: The Chaos Tower. It's basically Vampire Savior or whatever it's called. I think it was based on the Dreamcast version or something that we never got for some reason. Anyways, Street Fighter Alpha 3 Max, which is an updated version of Street Fighter Alpha 3 itself, having gone through a number of updated versions, on the Dreamcast and PlayStation and whatnots. I think even the Game Boy Advance had a couple extra versions there. Mega Man Powered Up, which is a chibified remake of the original Mega Man. They added a couple extra Robot Masters to even it up to 8, because the first Mega Man only had 6. And it has a level creation system, which was, what sold me on the package overall. I like, these games where they offer you, like, creative tools to create your own little worlds and stuff like that. I thought that was a nice little deal there. Mega Man Maverick Hunter X, which is a remake of the original Mega Man X. Not a big fan of this one, actually. I like the Mega Man X games just fine. Up until 7, which I thought was terrible. But Maverick Hunter X, it's alright, but, not for me. Anyways, next up we have Capcom Classics Collection Remixed, which was the first compilation for the PSP. Some games include, the only one that comes to mind is the first Street Fighter, which, I guess is a classic because it's the first Street Fighter, but not a very good game otherwise. Capcom Classics Collection Reloaded has a nice little slot machine that you could get extra zenny for, or whatever the case may be. I don't know if it's this one or the other one. Anyways, has more Capcom games. Could never go wrong with Capcom games back when they were good and not. Anyways, they got Metal Slug Anthology, which I also have for the PS2, and this and the PS2 version took me a good long while to find, because the only version you could find of Metal Slug Anthology for a while was the Wii version, and I didn't want to get the Wii version because that had like weird control setups, and I wanted a control setup that was traditional and sort of rambling here. Namco Museum Battle Collection. It's a Namco Museum set, has all the usual suspects. You have the Sega Genesis Collection, which has a number of Sega Genesis games, obviously. You have the SNK Arcade Classics Volume 1. If the autofocus, you'll have to take my word for it, because the autofocus simply decided not to work. Title Legends Power Up, can't read, sorry. Recovering from a cold here, so it's to be expected. Anyways, Title Legends. Midway Arcade Treasures Extended Play has the first 3 Mortal Kombats, 1, 2, and 3, as well as Joust and a number of other Midway, Williams, Atari classics, whatever you could think of. Not modest little collection. I also have the 3 Midway Arcade Treasures on the Xbox, and some of those games you could probably find on Midway Arcade Origins for the current consoles, or last-gen consoles, whatever. Gradius Collection, which contains the first 4 Gradius games, as well as Gradius Gaiden, that was on the PlayStation. And that was a nice little find, actually. I found that one by accident. Excuse me. And finally, we got EA Replay, which is a compilation of some older Electronic Arts published, developed games that appeared on the Sega Genesis or Super Nintendo. So you got games like Road Rash, you got the Wing Commander games, and Bob, just a couple I could name off the top of my head. Pretty solid collection. that was unique for a PlayStation. I don't think they made something like this for the PS2 or anything like that, which is a bit of a shame, but you know, it was something exclusive for PSP, I suppose. So that's the PSP collection. It's a rather modest collection for the most part. Nothing particularly major, nothing in terms of what you would normally associate as AAA or whatever the case may be, but you know, it's a library that, you know, kind of suits my tastes, I suppose, for lack of a better term. So anyways, that's a collection. Not much else to say there. So thanks for watching. Till next time, take care, good night. I'm going to start on the next one right now, and you'll probably see that one next week, so later.